Hello. So today I want to talk about breastfeeding versus bottle feeding or formula feeding your little one. When you are a new mom or a mom of an infant, it's so easy to feel the pressure of those around you pushing you to breastfeed. And breastfeeding is wonderful. It's extremely exhausting, but it's so good for your little one. Whatever nutrition they need or they're lacking, your body will give them exactly what they need. They get custom milk just for them, which is amazing. But breastfeeding is not easy for every woman. Not every woman can just breastfeed and pump and have, a refrigerator or a freezer full of milk on hand and donate their milk to the milk banks and, just feel great and, oh, I've got so much energy and I'm just pumping and making tons of milk for my little one. That's not the case for most of us, right? We deal with different things like engorgement and mastitis. Our nipples and our breasts get infected. Sometimes our nipples crack and bleed. Sometimes we're just not producing enough for our little one, or we're not getting the rest that we need because we're taking care of other children and we can't produce as much milk as we need to produce for them. So there are a lot of reasons why women end up supplementing or turning to formula. And I just wanted to kind of share with you my experience with bottle feeding and breastfeeding my little ones and kind of my mom's experience too. There is no judgment here, so please do not feel that from me. You have to obviously make whatever choice is best for your little one, yourself, and your family. If that means breastfeeding, awesome. If that means pumping, great. If that means that you have to switch to formula, that's okay. Remember, the most important thing is not that you breastfeed your little one. The most important thing is that you're able to take care of yourself and your little one and your other family members, right? So your quality of life is important. If you're breastfeeding or pumping and you are exhausted and grumpy and you're being short with everyone and you have the worst attitude and you can barely take care of the other members of your family, then maybe you shouldn't be breastfeeding or pumping. Just something to think about. So with our first son, I breastfed pretty much only for the first 3 months. On occasion, I would supplement with formula if it was like an over the night feeding and, he had just woken up an hour before, 2 hours before, and I was already depleted. Sometimes we would use formula. Or if we were somewhere in public and I didn't feel comfortable breastfeeding, then we would just, take out a bottle, make a bottle of formula and give it to him on hand. And I would also pump after I breastfed because the pediatrician had recommended 2 things to me. One, that I pump after I breastfeed to stimulate my milk supply. And 2, to take a supplement called fenugreek, which is wonderful. So I was doing both. I was taking the supplement and pumping. And then whatever I pumped, I would just store in the freezer or the refrigerator for later. So fast forward to his 3-month checkup and my son wasn't really gaining weight. He had really plateaued and we were concerned. So we switched to bottles. So I started dipping into my frozen supply in the freezer and putting it in bottles so I could monitor how many ounces he was drinking. And he was drinking 40 ounces a day. Crazy, right? 40 ounces a day for about a week. So after maybe 4 days or so, I had used up everything in the freezer and then I was pumping and supplementing with formula as necessary. It was just crazy. So obviously he wasn't getting enough. He was nursing at length and I was producing what I thought was enough, but he just wasn't getting enough. So from month 3 until, 7.5 months. So for 4.5 months after that, I would just pump. And occasionally I'd have him latch on in the evenings just to make sure that my milk was giving him exactly what he needed. But I would just basically pump and then supplement with formula. And that definitely slowed down my milk supply. I was able to monitor how much he was drinking, but I wasn't making as much. So by 7.5 months, I was done. I was exhausted. I was 10 pounds lighter than my starting weight before getting pregnant, and it was just too thin for me, and I was just, like I said, exhausted. So I stopped. And then from 7.5 months to 12 months, we just did formula for him. And he turned out perfectly fine. He's great. Now, with kiddo number 2, it was a different story. So started breastfeeding right away and was only breastfeeding until his 2-week appointment, which his 2-week checkup was at 10 days. And when I took him in, we looked, and in 1 week's time, he had only gained 1 ounce. That's nothing. So we were concerned because he still hadn't come back up to his birth weight, and here he was at 10 days. So the pediatrician said, okay, bring him back in a few days. We need to weigh him again and make sure that he's at his birth weight. So in the meantime, I started supplementing with formula and pumping and putting it in a bottle so I could see how much he was drinking. And a few days later, we weighed him, and he was well over his birth weight. He had gained like 9 ounces in 3 days, which was just absurd. So we chalked it up to a mismeasurement, for his previous appointment. He must have been misweighed, and he was fine. He was doing great. But by doing that, by going to pumping and supplementing with formula and all of that, it slowed down my milk supply, which I was just starting to really rev up. So over the next 2.5 to 3 months, it was a battle to take supplements and drink a ton of water and try to pump and breastfeed and pump and just, oh my goodness. And then when you switch to the convenience of formula, being on the go, being able to go and run a couple errands in a row, or go out to dinner, or go out to lunch, or whatever, go about your normal life, it's really hard then to go back and try to rebuild your breast milk supply. So 2 weeks into going back to work full time, caring for a bunch of other kiddos, I dried up. So I was only able to breastfeed him for about 3.5 months, which was really hard for me because I looked at my first, experience, and I was able to do it for 7.5 months. And by 3.5 months with my second kiddo, I was completely dried up. And then he started having issues with different formulas and breaking out, eczema all over his body. And, then the comments would come and, oh, too bad you're not able to breastfeed him. And if only we had more breast milk frozen, and, da. And so that was really hard. But as a side note, even women that breastfeed, their kiddos can have eczema. It depends on what the mother is ingesting, and that can affect their skin. So it's not foolproof, okay? Then with my mom, she had 4 of us, and she breastfed us for anywhere from like 2 weeks to 9 months. Most of us, I think, were in like the 3 or 4 month range on average. So just as a comparison, I was kiddo number 2. My mom only breastfed me for about 2 weeks. I was born at 10 pounds, 1 ounce, poor mother, and I was 23.5 inches long. So she could only keep up with me for a couple weeks, and then she had to take my bottles, take the nipples from the bottles, cut X's in them, and put baby cereal in my bottles at 2 weeks old because I was just starving. And I mean, I was off the charts for years, and so there was no way that woman was going to be able to keep up with me. I had a healthy appetite. Then my younger sister, who was number 3, she got breastfed the longest. She did not want a bottle. So she got breastfed for, I think, about 9 months. And honestly, she was the runt of the litter. I love her to death, but she was the runt of the litter. And it seemed like she was sick the most often of any of us kids. And she also got a ton of ear infections growing up. So even though she had that awesome breast milk for the longest, she still, faced her own sicknesses and issues that she had. Now, fast forward, all of us are adults now. We're all healthy. There's no negative side effects that we can tell from being breastfed or formula fed or a combination of the two. Like I said, the majority of us, we were formula fed babies, and I think we turned out pretty good. So Whatever you choose to do for your child, for yourself, for your family, your little one will be okay. I know that you're going to make the best decision possible. You're going to look at the big picture and you're going to decide what you're able to do, how long you're able to do it for. And at the end of the day, you know what's best for you, your family, and your child, and you're going to have to make that call. Please be encouraged, and please just drown out any noise, any naysayers, any negativity that's telling you that you're not doing an amazing job, because you are. Be blessed.